Hey guys, my name is Haley and today I will be filming my Tome Topple wrap-up, so I'm gonna get started. So before the Tome Topple started, the week before, I actually read Daughter of Smoke and Bone because I wanted to read the sequels for Tome Topple, which was created by Sam from Thoughts on Tomes. I'll leave her link down below. So as soon as the Readathon started, I read Days of Blood and Starlight, and this entire trilogy was fantastic and I loved it so much, and I knew that I liked Laini Taylor's writing style, but I had no idea how much I was gonna love it, and now I need her new book immediately, which is really depressing because it's not out yet, but soon. I loved Karu, I loved Susanna, I loved all of the characters in this. I love the world. I love that a lot of it was set in Prague, which I don't think I've ever read a book set in that city before, so that was the first part of Tome Topple, and this really took up all of the first week of the Readathon because that's more than 1,000 pages right there. And then while I was reading those, I actually read the graphic novel. It's called Spiderman Secret Origins, which I got from Half Price Books the day before the Readathon started and just kind of threw it into my TBR. But I actually fell in love with this, and I don't know if I've ever read any Spider-Man comics before, but I'm now obsessed and have actually asked around to see where a good place to start with the Spider-Man comics or graphic novels would be, and gotten a couple responses, so I think I'm gonna dive into more Spider-Man here soon. By the way, I gave all of those 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I started The Queen of the Tearling by Erica Johansson because, quite frankly, I wanted to read this because the cover is beautiful and I had heard really good things about it. I know Reagan from Peruse Project was a huge fan of it, and I had heard some mixed things, so I was a little bit worried going into it, especially coming out of another fantasy series that my mind was still in. I found this book to be so entertaining. I loved the pace of it. I loved the characters. I particularly loved Mace, who, if you saw my last video, is now moving his way up in some of my favorite characters. Kelsey was just a great character to read from, and I loved the way this world was set up. It was a lot more dark and brutal than I was expecting. Like, I hadn't heard that about it when I heard people talk about it, so I was a little bit surprised, but I liked the way the world was set up and the magic system, even though we don't really know a whole lot about it yet. And I cannot wait to get my hands on the sequel to this, which will hopefully be soon. I read Volume 3 of Death Note, the Black Editions. I love this series so much. This one was super intense, like, compared to the first two even. I flew through this while I was reading Queen of the Tearling. And then, people, a terrible thing happened. Well, a great, but also terrible thing happened. I made the mistake after finishing Death Note. I decided that since the Tony Awards were on Sunday night, I couldn't watch them without having listened to the Hamilton soundtrack, which I haven't actually done yet since it came out, even though I've been hearing nothing but amazing things about it. If you didn't know, I'm a huge theater fan, and I used to do musicals and community theater and shows at my high school for a good 7-8 years of my life. So the fact that I hadn't listened to Hamilton was just really unacceptable. But I'd managed to avoid spoilers and everything for it up until this point. But after the Tonys, I was like, okay, I have to watch those. This past Monday, I decided to listen to the soundtrack, which I found on YouTube somewhere. And I kind of unexpectedly became obsessed with it. And I've only listened to the first act because I was telling myself that I couldn't finish the soundtrack until I finished this readathon, otherwise I wasn't gonna get anything done. But I'm a little bit obsessed, and I haven't even finished the soundtrack. Also, for anybody else who is obsessed with Hamilton, I'm sorry for this rant if you're not, but I did not know somehow that Jonathan Groff was in that show. I love Jonathan Groff so much. Like, he was one of my favorite performers. When his song came up, without knowing he was in it, and I recognized his voice. I literally lost my mind. I was like, is that Jonathan Groff? And like immediately went and looked up the cast list, and sure enough it was him, which made me love the show so much more. I actually have the Hamilton coming in the mail, so you'll be seeing that soon if I decide to do a book haul, which I think I might because I've acquired a lot of books. Back to the readathon. I made another mistake, and my friend asked me to go to the library with her on Monday night, the same day I made the mistake of listening to Hamilton. So I made her listen to Hamilton on our way to the library. I saw 2 books there that I've seen nothing but crazy hype about on booktube for the last year, or probably longer, but especially its sequel. So since I was almost done with my original TBR for this readathon, I decided to pick both of them. I picked up A Court of Thorns and Roses and A Court of Mist and Fury. Now, if you take a look at my Goodreads, you will know that I sped through these, but mainly because I wanted to finish them today because I will not be able to read tomorrow, and I wanted to take a break on Sunday. So I will not be reading for the last 2 days of this readathon, which is why I'm filming this today. And I want to take a break before TBR Takedown starts next week, since I literally read thousands of pages. Take a look at my Goodreads, you'll know that I did not like A Court of Thorns and Roses. I had so many problems with this. I think I just don't mesh well with Sarah J. Maas's writing style. There was one character in this book that I liked, and that was Lucian. He was the only thing that got me through this book, to be completely honest. Like, the last 100 pages or so were better than the majority of this book, but I don't think I would have been able to get through it if I hadn't had everybody telling me that A Court of Mist and Fury was so much better. I made it through this book, and I was not a fan, and I was real worried. Yesterday, I started A Court of Mist and Fury. This is a 600 some page book. I did struggle through the first 100 to 200 pages of this. This book was infinitely better than that first one, and I actually do want to buy this book, but now I'm gonna have to buy both of them, even though I didn't like the first book, because otherwise it's gonna drive me nuts to just see just this one on my shelves. I'm not gonna say a whole lot about this because I don't want to give off any spoilers. Number one, this series is not young adults, so any youngins out there, please do not read this. This book was so much better. Even if you haven't read it, you could probably read my Goodreads review on it. I'll leave my link below. The last 150 pages of this had me on the edge of my seat, and I was just so invested in these characters by the end of it. So I was very pleased with how this turned out, and I can't wait to get my hands on the next book in the series, which is depressing because this just came out. I also read a book based on the musical Rant, which is actually my favorite musical of all time, that I got from the library at the same time I got those. I think I'll leave that for my regular wrap-up at the end of the month for books I read in between readathons or at the end of the readathon, because there's a couple days in between, so you'll see that in a later video. Those are all the books I read for Tome Topple. Thank you to Sam from Thoughts on Tomes for creating this readathon, because I read so many things and put a huge dent in my TBR, which is what I was hoping for with this readathon, so I'm very pleased with that. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time in my next video. Probably a book haul. I will see you guys next time.